The Honorable Chief Justice and Associate Justices of the Supreme Court.
The House will come to order.
The Senate will come to order.
Okay, we're going to go to Senate Bill 1266. Alexandra.
Mr. Chair, members, statute exempts certain classes of individuals from specified misconduct involving weapons violations. Peace officers, certain correctional employees, and state and federal military personnel are exempt from 7 specified violations. Senate Bill 1266 would provide the same defense to elected or appointed judicial officers. Mr. Vice Chair, there is an amendment to the bill. Would you like me to explain it?
Please.
The 10-line amendment in Senator Pierce's name, dated February 14th, 2014 at 2:47 p.m., only exempts judicial officers from misconduct involving weapons if the violation involves carrying in a public establishment and that establishment is the court facility where that judicial officer works. In addition, the amendment specifies that hearing officers and part-time judicial officer pro temps are not judicial officers. The amendment also specifies that judicial officers are still subject to the rules of the presiding Superior Court judge. With that, Mr. Vice Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Senator Bradley.
What is, or who is a judicial officer? Who does that include totally?
Mr. Vice Chair, Senator Bradley, although judicial officer is not defined in Arizona revised statutes, it's possible that it refers to a justice of the peace, a judge, possibly a constable. However, it's not defined within statute, Senator, Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Chair, it's not an officer of the court. That's something different than a judicial. Is that right? Anybody know?
Mr. Bradley. Alexandra.
Mr. Chair, Senator, it's my understanding that it's correct.
Any other questions? Thank you, Alexander. We have, in support of the bill, wishing to speak, Terry Stewart.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Terry Stewart. I'm with the firm Dunn Stewart Group, and we represent the Arizona Justice of the Peace Association. The Arizona Justice of the Peace Association represents the 91 judges throughout Arizona. We'd like to take this first opportunity to thank Senator Pierce for sponsoring this piece of legislation. The issue of judicial officer safety is an issue that the Executive Board of AJPA is concerned about, and this legislation tries to address that. You know, every day judges make decisions in civil and criminal cases that make people unhappy, makes them mad. It profoundly, in some cases, affects their lives. And while the very large majority of the people who are subject to those decisions accept those decisions and go on with their life, there are a few that don't. Here in Maricopa County and the other 2 generally metropolitan areas, court security involves armed officers, but that's not the case in all places. In fact, here in Maricopa County, the only place there are armed officers in a court facility is where there's a superior court. And so for those justice courts throughout Maricopa County that are co-located, they have security, armed security. For every other justice court outside of those that are co-located, there is no armed security, and that's the case in most of the justice courts throughout Arizona. Arizona's been really forward-thinking with regard to allowing citizens to carry firearms. And for the most part, that is very good public policy, not only for the citizens, it's also good public policy for the judges because they can carry a firearm in most places. However, there are a few places that this particular statute prevents a judge from carrying a weapon. There are 3 in particular but two are so minor they are not being addressed by the amendment. The three places are on school grounds, in polling places, and then in a public establishment or public event where the operator or sponsor asks the individual to remove and secure the weapons. And so what we're really focused on here today with the amendment is that particular location. You know, when someone who is being pursued because of a concern moves into one of these weapon-free zones, and this would be let me give you an example. Maybe a good example would be a state fair or a county fair. They simply become defenseless. And so if you are the focus of someone being after you because you've made an adverse decision, well, in this case, you're defenseless. And so what this particular piece of legislation does is to try to solve that by exempting judges who may find themselves feeling threatened or being threatened to carry a weapon. This particular modification does not make it mandatory that anybody carry a weapon. It simply allows them to carry a weapon. So what we would do is we would hope you would support the Arizona Justice of the Peace Association in trying to enhance the security of their particular members and the members also that are included in the term judicial officer. And let me just, if I might for a moment, clarify that. Judicial officer refers to an elected or appointed judge or commissioner, and while pro tems are considered judicial officers, in this case, we only contemplate the exemption being extended to a full-time pro tem. So said another way, if a pro tem is assigned to a court for full-time because of the absence of the judge or the inability of the judge to perform over some extended period of time, then the amendment contemplates that they would be covered. Hearing officers are not part of the definition of a judicial officer, and constables do not fall within that purview. Constables are part of the executive branch and not part of the judicial branch. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Senator Yarborough.
Mr. Vice Chairman, Mr. Stewart, I'm looking at the amendment, and it says that the judicial officer shall comply with any rule or policy promulgated by the presiding judge of the Superior Court while in the court facility. Does that mean a presiding judge could say no weapons?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Senator Yarborough, yes, it does. Within the purview of the judicial branch, the presiding judge controls what goes on within the court facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Is there any training component involved or even advanced training component if these folks are at risk?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Senator, no, there isn't. I mean, not any more than of the normal citizen who would be able to carry concealed into one of these places or to carry a weapon.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Also signed in wishing to speak, Clancy Jane.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and committee. I want to express special thanks to Senator Pierce for bringing this forward. Senator Yarborough, maybe I'll answer your question first. One of the things that happens when we pass laws or rules that are real wide branched, sometimes there needs to be checkpoints. And each county has a presiding Superior Court judge. And this approval would be subject to their approval. And if there is some circumstance, Senator, that as you addressed, that perhaps that judge did not feel a person was qualified, then they would be a checkpoint. And that's the purpose of that. Now, it doesn't override it completely, but currently, that's one of the reasons that I think this change has not been brought forward, is that is an option that is included now. But let me come back to what has brought us here. First off, for the first time since I've been a judge, and for the first time I think ever, we're able to bring something to you that has full support from all the justices of the peace of Arizona. And that's being because we only meet once a year, and so consequently in September we don't usually know what's going to happen down here the next year. But in this case, this was such an issue with the judges throughout the state that it was discussed and moved forward from our September annual meeting. And so I'm coming to you not speaking as just my own support, but the support of all 91 judges, which that's a big deal because we've never been able to do that previously. Now, the other thing that I want to point out to you is those of you that know we're all from the great state of Maricopa, one of the very first things I found when I became a judge is that the rural judges didn't quite exactly appreciate what was done by the judges that were in Maricopa County because quite often they were the only ones that would come down here and speak. So consequently, there was a little concern from the rural judges as to what was really going on and whose agendas it was. Now, at a weak moment, the president at the time asked me to chair the legislative committee for the state association. And I asked the gentleman at the time, I said, do you realize that I'm from the great state of Maricopa? And he did recognize that, but since then, we have worked together very closely with all of the judges of Arizona, and this is an example of a fact that we brought this forward. Now, I was just brought an order of protection that it was brought to me by a defense attorney for a defendant that had appeared in, that they had represented in court. And this defendant was so egregious that the defense attorney came and asked me for an order of protection and actually suggested strongly that that be modified to cover not only the prosecutor but the judge because of how egregious these statements were. Folks, we have some bad people that are in court. And in the case of rural judges, very few of them have any security whatsoever. They are all elected, and most of them have been elected for several terms, 12, 14, 16 years. Because they're elected, it's necessary for them to attend the events, county fairs, state fairs, celebrations where perhaps carrying is prohibited. And consequently, they're quite a target. Now, I may be a little less target than I was when I sat in your chair because I'm 100 pounds less, but I'm still a big target, okay? And judges that are known quite well in their rural communities can be such. So affording them the extra opportunity to be able to protect themselves seems appropriate, and that's why we are asking you to consider passing this bill. And I'll be happy to answer any questions I can.
Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We don't have anyone else sign in wishing to speak. So if Senator Pierce, will you please move the bill?
If I could move the amendment first.
First you move the bill, and then you move.
I thought we
Move the bill.
moved it. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that Senate Bill 1266 receive a due pass recommendation.
Will you move the amendment?
The amendment I move that the amendment be accepted. Senate Bill 1266 dated 2/14/14 at 2:47 p.m. in my name be adopted.
Thank you. Will you move the bill as amended now?
No, we need to vote the
Oh,
amendment.
yes. You've heard that motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Presiding have it, do have it so ordered. Now you could move it as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Senate Bill 1266, as amended, receive a due pass recommendation.
Thank you, members. You've heard the motion. Those in favor? Oh, Secretary will please call the roll. I haven't been a committee chairman in a long time.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, may I?
Please.
Thank you. Yeah. Normally, I'm not real enamored with promulgating, more weapons being out there, but I think justices of the peace do have a unique role in our state, and do have unique exposures that I think you made your case, at least to me. So I vote aye.
Mr. Chairman, may I explain my vote?
Please.
I have a permit, and I passed the class, and I'm proud to say I shot the best in my class, and there were 9 men and 4 women, and I still have the target at home that I could bring in at another time. And my husband was a sharpshooter in the Marines, and he was in the class, so it's hard for him to live that down. He had 7 shots tight, but the other 3 were kind of shoulder. But this reminds me of a bill that a constituent brought to me about people not having access to their weapons in places where they really could come forward to the public good. I'm not going to support this, but I would support it if there was a mandatory training, and not only the basic concealed weapon class, but a little bit more stringent than that, because I do understand that you're at risk. I do represent a rural county. I represent all of Santa Cruz County. So if the sponsors would consider some training, I would. I'm voting no now, but I would consider voting for it on the floor. Thank you.
Aye.
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 Mr. Vice Chair, I'll explain my vote. With the amendment by the sponsor, I vote aye.
Aye. Members, by your vote of 7 ayes, 1 nay, 1 not voting, you have returned Senate Bill 1266 with the due pass recommendation.
All right. 1266. Rick.
Mr. Chairman, members, for the record, my name is Rick Hazelton. I'm the Assistant Analyst for the Judiciary Committee. Mr. Chairman and members, Senate Bill 1266 allows an elected or appointed judicial officer to carry a deadly weapon in the court in which he or she works. The bill stipulates that a judicial officer shall comply with any rules or regulations that are put in place by the presiding judge of the Superior Court while in the court facility. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Any questions for Rick? None? Okay. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Hi, Kelsey. Okay, we have Judge Jane here.
Well, good morning. I am Judge Clancy James, Desert Ridge Justice Court. I also am the chairman of the State Legislative Committee. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing us to speak today. This is a bill that some of you may be shocked that this doesn't happen now or isn't currently. Judges aren't subject to this. In the Maricopa County, the judicial buildings are blessed with really strong security. The rural courthouses don't have such issues, and several of our judges, because they're longtime elected officials, are become subject to, being a little target. And so several of them have brought to us the need for this, and of course it would be subject to the rules and limitations that all officials are subject to. There has been a recommendation that we also amend this at some point in the process, that judges that request this would be subject to some type of training, proper training as law enforcement officers would be, and we're not opposed to that at all, and expect that amendment to be submitted before it goes to the floor, or when it goes to the floor.
Okay. Any questions? Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have anybody else that needs to speak, unless you want them to. So, would you move the bill?
Yes, I move that Senate Bill 1266 be returned with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Secretary, call the roll.
Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Mr. Contreras?
Aye.
Mr. Dale? Mr. Hale?
Aye.
Mr. Orr?
Aye.
Mr. Casati?
Aye.
Mr. Pierce?
Aye.
Mr. Farnsworth?
Aye. Members, by your vote of 7 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent, you've returned Senate Bill 1266 with a due pass recommendation.